What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Jin and Tantra, Spirituality with a Twist. Today you have Daniel kind of driving the ship, and we have one new friend with us, Rory. I forgot your last name. I
Hil-
apologize.
Hiltbrand.
Hiltbrand, Rory Hiltbrand, whom I have just met recently, like in the last half hour. But I saw Rory give a lecture about a month ago, getting some continuing education for my acupuncture license, and I just said, this dude is super interesting, and I think we would be friends. And so I sent him an email, and here we are. And for those wondering, who are regular listeners who are wondering where Eric is, he is off tonight on retreat. So we wish him well in his practice and his meditations, and I'm sure he'll be sending all of us some kind of psychic love, and hopefully not the creepy kind. Um, but anyways, Roy, thank you for coming on today, man. I really do appreciate it. One of the things that's unique about having a podcast, and we've been doing this now for like 3.5 years, is that, you know, I get to send an email to somebody who I've never met before and be like, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you and record it, And
Mhm.
we're like, okay, that sounds cool. But if I didn't have it and I'd said, hey, I want to talk to you on the phone or on Zoom for no real reason at all, it's a little weird, man. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah,
so thank you for coming on and being open to chat. And most of our audience doesn't know you, but maybe some of the people you share this podcast with will. But for those that don't, tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then maybe more importantly, kind of like the story that got you there.
sure. So I'm an acupuncturist like yourself. I have been doing a lot of lectures lately, and the content of those lectures, the subject matter, has been mostly Daoist numerology, which I have learned from a Korean Daoist lineage for the past 10 years. I've been studying with their current uh, head of the lineage, Grandmaster Sung Baek. It's a um, Dohon clan, which translates to Eastern scholars. And the way that I got into it, I was actually a mathematical economics major back in the day. And, um, but really, I was always really fascinated with being on the frontier of what we know
Mm,
and what is reality and what is our place within it. And so I really wanted to study physics when I was in undergrad, but at the time I was pretty good at math, so I got into this undergraduate research fellowship with the NSF, and so they just left me in a room, and I would be on a computer doing math research,
mm,
chaos theory research, for hours at a time, and I just racked up all these like high level math credits.
mm.
And so it was just really easy for me to get a math major. And I took some economics courses as well. And some of the research was applying chaos theory to certain economic models.
Mm.
And so I got this math econ major, and I took a couple physics classes, but not really, which is what I wanted to. I still love math too, but
Mhm.
there's something about the physics which is it's interfacing with reality a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you and I were talking a little bit before we started, and I was, telling you, sharing with you my love of physics from my undergrad days, and how if things had turned just slightly different, that I definitely would have been a physics major for sure. So I'm glad that we had that. It's hard, for me. It's conceptually like beautiful to see when you get it, but for me,
Mhm.
getting there is a difficult part. But I love things that bring me great challenge, in life.
Yeah.
I do. And I'm not going to say it because I don't want all of a sudden to be like all of a sudden fire starts falling from the sky. But some things challenge you in a particular way. So it's cool to hear that.
Yeah, well, if you ever wanna talk more math or physics or anything, I'm always happy to do
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So I guess one question I have is just for now, and then I'll let you continue just so we can keep
Mhm,
people kind of caught up. Like Taoist numerology, which is what you've been lecturing on more recently. For
mhm.
people who don't know what that is, which I'm sure is not many, I'm sure people know, but for the newbies, how would you explain? how would you explain that to people who've never heard of this before? And then why are you drawn towards that now?
Sure, sure. So what was really appealing to me, and I'll tell you how I got there, or we could skip it too if it's not that interesting.
Yeah, you know.
But I eventually met my Taoist master, and when people ask him what is Taoism,
Mm,
his answer is always multidimensional math. And so that was really appealing to me because it was always something, nebulous and mysterious. But this was, and this photo behind me was actually from my master. It's like my Doctor Strange
mm,
map of the multi-dimensional structure. Um, and so essentially, you can think of Taoist numerology as really the source code of life.
mm,
It's the numbers which are correspond to the geometric underpinning of this conscious substrate of reality.
mm,
And so there's so much going into it, and you can think of like it's so embedded in Chinese culture, but it's also really gotten into the global zeitgeist of like the yin yang symbol, the Tai
mhm,
Chi symbol, which
mhm,
represents yin yang,
mhm,
and like the Chinese coins, they're circular with the square in the center.
mhm,
Um, but so, in the Taoist classics like the Neijing, it talks about, the ancient people knew the way to live. They followed the patterns of yin and yang and the numerical symbols. They applied the numerical symbols to life.
mm,
So it's this book on Chinese medicine, but it's really these Taoist numerology understandings are you apply to life.
mm,
And so Chinese medicine is just one application of this understanding of this energetic phenomena, multidimensional phenomena, and its dynamics and interactions. Um, and so Chinese medicine is one facet. You could argue even Tai Chi is another facet, and in these
mm.
balances of yin and yang, and the flow and these patterns, divinations, stems and branches, feng shui, and so on and so forth. Really, I call it the source code of
Yeah.
reality. It's the underlying like matrix that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely I get that, and from my understanding of this, I agree.
Mhm,
I guess the question I have though is like, have you in talking about this and getting questions from people, have you found any kind of like Western correlates to this? I guess I could say like recognition or application of this multidimensional math in imprinted or not imprinted, but kind of like poking through, right? Because to me, you know, Tai Chi in particular, and the way that people move
mhm,
is very it's geometric. It's not like straight lines like not for people who are thinking of like triangles or something like this.
mhm,
It's not straight lines like that, but it's working within the matrix around the body.
mhm,
And I don't know, just something I'm fascinated with is like, is there anything that people have found in different cultures that
mhm,
represent something from another culture without it being like necessarily related? Because then, like how we talked about before we started recording, you see something in one culture, you see it in another culture in a totally
mhm.
different paradigm, and you're like, to me, now I have found a very deep truth that tells my rational mind to shut up. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. That's that old adage, when you see the way deeply, you see it in all things. It's like when you
Hmm.
see the Tao deeply, you see it in all things. And I really, everywhere I look, I'm always relating it to that. And I think that's really the power of it is you interpret your reality through this map of this
Mm,
understanding of the numerics. And then as you bring it back to medicine more and more as a practitioner, you become so much more sophisticated. Or even, I mean, a big one for me was like I've studied all these things, and you know, I go and I was cooking for this big meditation class we were having. There's like cooking for like 35 people.
what kind of
So we make
meditation
it.
was this, Rory?
So I do Siddha yoga. Have you heard of it?
I've
It was
never. Is it like Siddhi, like Siddhi, or
Siddha.
okay,
So it's specifically a lineage that was brought to America by Swami Muktananda,
okay,
and it's currently under Swami Chidvilasananda.
okay,
And it's really been, in addition to the Taoist practices I do, it's been really powerful for me.
okay.
Um,
And so you were cooking for this
so I
meditation.
was cooking,
Yeah.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
cooking, and one of the fellow people helping me cook added about 6 times. She calculated the salt to go in. She added about 6 times the necessary salt.
Mm,
So, obviously, I mean, that's way too salty, and so
savory, Rory, savory.
yeah, very, very savory, and so, uh, we eat it and, we're like, "Oh god," and I was like, "Wait, I know what to do." So went in, I used the 5 elements. First I add a bunch of honey, so I use, the
Sweet.
earth element
Yeah.
to control the salt, and then I add, um and then it balances out, like, pretty quickly, and
Yeah.
it's palatable at this point, and then added, between them, I added some more, spice to it, and it was actually quite good after.
A little more
But
acid.
that's just one example of, like, in everyday life that
Yeah.
the 5 elements really does work, and then
Mm,
6 chi is even more incredible. But I do wanna get to an example of that I've been thinking about a lot is, in Western culture, maybe yeah, in Western culture, is in jujitsu.
okay.
So, in a lot of positions where you're, like, locking, and maybe I might lose a bunch of people who aren't familiar with jujitsu, but a
We'll
lot
just
of these
call it wrestling.
okay, grappling,
Yeah, there we
wrestling.
go.
Um, in a lot of positions where you're controlling someone, you make triangular figures like a kimura or a triangle with your
Yeah,
legs,
yeah,
or there's all these other positions, honey hole, um, you know, even a rear naked. These are all triangular
yeah.
things which are locking in positions. When you do certain like back takes, like a rolling back take or a berimbolo or a samurai roll, you're making like a torus movement
Mm,
to rotate yourself and this other person to take the back.
mm,
And so that's just another example of like everyday life where I really see it. But,
yeah.
you also see it in all these other traditions. You see these same truths at the core of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's Japanese, but Aikido comes to mind for me for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, definitely. And then obviously all the Japanese traditions, right? Like beyond just the calligraphy, but I don't want to call it sword play. That sounds like LARPing or something, oddly sexual, you know what I'm saying? But working with a samurai sword or something like this is they're moving through space in curved and straight lines simultaneously.
Mhm.
So that's super interesting. That really because I think we hear numerology, right? At least
Uh-huh.
I hear numerology, and you think about the more contemporary ideas around numerology. You're like, oh, she's a 3 and I'm a 7. We'll never get along. You know what I'm saying? Or something like this. That there's this, you know,
Like Enneagram? Is that what you
yeah, yeah. Like there's like personality types and things like this around
Gotcha.
numbers, and it's funny to me that there's so many various permutations on things that I wanted to, I wanted you to, I'm glad that you went into it that way because that's what I found. One of the things I found super interesting with your with your talk. So I guess, you have this as some of the way in which you see the world, right? It
Mhm.
kind of influences that. And I guess, just like a kind of like a practical question I have, like, how does that influence how you make decisions in like for your life, just as a practitioner, as a husband, I know how it affects your jujitsu, your wrestling practice,
Mhm.
but it's also, one more boxing, at least in the way that the way I understand boxing is you're within a square, but you're moving circularly within this
Mhm.
kind of a square. Anyways, how does this how does how being conscious of it in the way that you are, how does this affect the way that you think about the way you approach life or your practice or design in your home or making decisions? How does this work? Because I think we're also affected by things that we were influenced by coming up within our families and the cultures and the particular ethnicities that we have. But then as
Mm,
we grow up and start to forge our own way in the world, we get influenced by things that we're kind of like, we'll say, karmically attracted to.
right.
And that you're karmically attracted to this. So I'm interested in hearing how this kind of helps to form you as you're into your,
Mm,
adulthood, and having this kind of like outpouring of desire to share things that you find that have value.
yeah. Well, the thing is, not only find it so intellectually fascinating, but so practical that it really enlivens me, and it
Mhm.
makes me really want to share it and talk to people like you that I can see in their eyes, like, yeah, they're
Yeah.
really into this too. And
Yeah.
um, so I think the most tangible um, that people can just take right away from this too in
Yeah.
their own lives is in my own emotional experience.
Okay. Yeah.
So, we talked about in my lecture in Taoism, you come out of life like a branch from a tree. You
Yeah.
didn't come into life, you were an extension of life. So
Mm.
everything that's occurring within you is part of life, and it's part of these 5 elements, and it's part of these 6 chi, and it's expression of this one Tao. And so in your emotional experience every day, I think about this. So if I'm I might use the control cycle, like from chapter 67, it goes into detail. And I think a lot of people will sleep on the 5 elements, but if you really grasp it, it's really profound. Like it says, anger is of the wood element, so you can sedate it with grief. So if you get really upset about something and you're really angry, you're holding a resentment and you're petty about something, if you get a call like, "Oh, this person that you were close to just died,"
Mm.
like, quickly that will dry up
Mhm.
that anger,
Mhm.
like, it, it puts things in perspective. It gives that
Yeah.
metal element, sobering metal element. Or if you can use we have the different perspective in the Dohan. We talk about our 5 elements a little bit differently.
Mhm.
So, like, the earth element is the center of this tetrahedron, which I don't know if we'll have time to get into right now, but basically it's the great harmonizer and processing and everything. And if you don't have a solid earth element, you feel like something's missing.
Yeah. And
So,
I think for our audience, for who aren't familiar with the Chinese kind of stuff, the earth element as the center, you could consider it like your digestive
mhm,
area. Like we
mhm,
could I'll just make the correlation that
sure.
for people who are unfamiliar, we could just say it's your ability to digest and break things down, and turn potential into kinetic, turn food into energy, turn material that you're listening to or learning into more digestible bits that you can break down and
Mhm.
assimilate into your own being. So I just, I'm going to do that occasionally.
Great,
Yeah.
great. And
So,
also on an energetic level, it's our ability to digest our reality and our
mm,
narratives, and
mm,
taking the harsh edges off of all of these chaotic emotions and, giving it some body. So, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So, um, you can think about if you have a relationship for a long time, and that becomes kind of like your ground and your earth element and part of like how you've built your narratives around and your life around.
mm,
And suddenly you break up, that will quickly sedate, that controls the water element of fear. So if you have this, energy, this negative energy of the earth element, it will control. So, like, if you have a bad breakup and you're so heartbroken and you have that missing that like pulls on the heart, you're not afraid to you already want to die, so you're not afraid of anything. It's hard for your adrenal glands to be stimulated when you're in such like a depressive state. like
Yeah.
that. And that can also be from the fire element controlling as well.
Mm.
And so, you think of the generating cycle too. Like often we experience getting spooked into anger. So like if, you're driving your car and someone cuts you, or even if make a mistake, you can get mad at the other person because you get spooked.
Yeah.
The anger will spring from
Yeah.
the fear. And then if you express outwardly enough, especially in a close relationship, it moves into sadness. And then it's processed in this narrative of, oh, I'm a bad person. You can go into this, grief and regret and, oh, I'm a bad person. Have I damaged this relationship into fear?
Mm.
And so once you see these patterns in
Yeah.
your own emotional self and see these karmic cycles, which are just unconscious patterns, and
Hmm.
you see the patterns of it and you can map it to this geometry and watch it, they become less personal.
Yes. Yeah.
So it has less grip on you, and that's what we call Dao Ren. It gives you more Taoist view, which is essentially more zoomed out from the person.
I can say from myself that having an understanding of the psycho-emotional aspects of the elements in my own way that I see them, because you and someone else could take the exact same lecture from a teacher, and the way that
Mhm,
you interpret them and the way that you apply them is going to be slightly different. So everyone's going to have a slightly different relationship with these things. But I could say that taking this into my relationships and taking this into the clinic,
mhm.
I have a much better ability to dance with people, a
Yeah.
much better ability to dance with people. And sometimes I also have a understand. And when I say dance, I don't necessarily mean literally dance. So there's sometimes, you know, excuse me, sir, let's dance. Um, but what I mean is, I guess I could say engaging in meaningful conversation and sometimes difficult conversations or vulnerable conversations in a way that I am able to see where someone is coming from, what element or what psycho-emotional state they're tending towards, and then kind of play with my um, energy in the way that I address them so as to complement what they're doing and not feeling like I'm overwhelming or I'm
Mhm,
controlling them or I'm being like a
mhm,
petulant child or something like this, you know? And then also simultaneously knowing when someone resonates with me naturally being myself, because there are some people who we interact with, they just kind of don't, we don't get along well with them. And
yeah.
a lot of that's personality. And it's not personality like, oh, I like NASCAR and you like, whatever, knitting. It's
Mhm.
not that kind of personality. I know you know that, but I'm just, making a point
Yeah,
where
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
um that your personality type, whether you're more earth or more water, more metal, more fire, more wood, those are the five, just in case for, those who haven't, who aren't familiar, that you might be more, more earth in one setting, and somebody might be more water in another. And as your interaction together, they might feel like you're just too much for them, that
Mhm,
your sweetness and your giving is just like overbearing and like just taking too much of the up too much space. And so there's a natural tendency to be like, nah, I don't want to even be around this person. And this doesn't really have much anything to do with the way that someone is interacting with you. It's just who they are. And
mhm,
having this information to me has become extremely valuable in dealing with not the people who I get along with well, but in conflict resolution, in
mhm.
particular, communication, and then with patients, because people come in, we don't know them, and we're trying to, foster an air of communication and compassion, and to be able to leave where I normally operate from and take a different position for the betterment of that person, even if it's slightly uncomfortable for me. I can
Mhm.
say, oh, okay, that's where they are. All right, now at least I know now that like I can change myself a little bit or change my approach. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. I can change my
Yeah.
approach in order to foster a bridge with them. But I don't think that many people have that ability. And it's not that they can't. They haven't
Mhm,
been introduced to that as a possibility because they don't have the frame of reference. So this over the last couple of years, as I've kind of dove into this kind of ideology a little bit more, has really been a fascinating kind of psychological foray into combining, you know, Jungian style kind of psychology and 5 element um, psycho-emotional approaches to treatment. The kind of marriage of those things, two things together, has been very, very deep for me. And so I love to hear you talk about it because I'm like, oh yeah, sweet.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you, and I've thought about this in myself in the clinic as well. It's like in terms of like 5 elements, like you learn to sense what element like each patient needs, and it could change day to
Yeah,
day too.
yeah,
It's like, okay, does this person need more of a wood out, like an aggressive, like, look, you have to make these changes or
yeah,
else you're going to have these consequences. Do they need more fire? Like, do they need just some love in this moment and like
yes.
care? Do they, does it need to be sugar coated for it to go down? Or do you just need to like reference some studies and give them like really dry intellectual facts?
Yes.
Or, you know, any all of those things, you might the urgency, I would say, is more the water, like,
Mm.
but
And just kind of circling back so that we don't leave people like with their minds hanging. So you were at this meditation retreat.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh
So
yeah. So there's the meditation because you keep the thing. So you were cooking and it was too salty. You added some sweet and probably some acrid, and it was good. And then from there, because I wanted to hear how you kind of got into this.
yeah, yeah, so that was it. I mean, go and experiment for yourself how the control cycle can make for really more delicate flavor. So you can um, add more flavor and make a richer, whatever you're eating
Yeah.
dish without having to water it down.
And so how did that get you into the kind of like the Taoist numerology as a thing to start that you were or were you already studying it? And
Oh no, I've already been
oh, you were
studying a long time.
okay. So how
Yeah.
how did you I guess how did you first get into it then? I mean, how did you go from? I mean, you're a number oriented person, which we could
Yes.
say probably is a metallic quality.
Yeah.
Um, but so how did you go from like being very proficient in math and having all of this kind of like those tendencies towards processes to
Mm,
taking yes another process oriented kind of view of the world, but it's far more holotropic
mm,
and holistic, and it's a different path, I guess I could say, you know?
yeah.
And so how did you switch from kind of one life path to
Mhm.
not something totally different, but it's definitely a pivot. Like that is not when you first
Yeah.
were, I'm sure when you were sitting in those rooms doing that research for the NSF,
Mm.
that they were not like, you were not thinking, you know what I'm going to do in a couple of years?
Yeah.
I'm going to start
Seems
studying
like
Taoism. I,
yeah,
I
it's a
really don't
logical
think so.
transition.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that come about?
So after school, I went and I did, insurance underwriting.
Oh,
So I got
exciting.
a
My God, you
job.
are Iron Man, dude.
Um, and, I wasn't that into office politics. I still loved numbers and making models and stuff, but the whole, um, climbing the corporate ladder and all that just was
Yeah.
not appealing to me. And so I finally decided, I'm gonna quit. And I, at the time, um, the movie Interstellar had just can't come out.
Awesome movie.
Yeah. And so I saw that and I was like, oh yeah. I was thinking about, all right, what am I gonna do? And it's funny to think back, but when in your 20s and you don't have a job, it's like, oh my God, what am I? It's a crisis.
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Oh yeah, I've always loved physics." This was like my first in high school. I made like a Mysteries of the Universe club, and we'd talk about uh, you know, particle wave duality and quantum tunneling and all these interesting phenomena. And so I went and I started to get I needed some more prereqs at Villanova University. And so I was taking some courses there and I was loving it. And I started to learn how all of these physicists from the quantum revolution, like Tesla, Oppenheimer, Bohr, you name it,
Yeah.
they were all really into Eastern thought.
Yes.
And so I started looking into Eastern thought more, and I saw, how did these forest dwellers of antiquity know about time dilation, or
Mm.
and it just really touched. It was just the perfect timing of everything, and um I was really open for it at the time, and I ended up through um just by chance I met this Taoist grandmaster, and through one of his students,
Mhm.
and I went to go study with him. And what I saw him able to do when I he was treating some patients, and he would treat like stage 4 cancer patients,
What was he using as his treatment method? Was he
acupuncture,
he's using acupuncture.
acupuncture,
Okay.
moxa, herbs, but they were also doing chemotherapy.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and but what that because you can't really see much. I mean, you hear about the results, but
Yeah.
what I was able to see from his pulse diagnosis blew my mind. He would take the pulse and he was just frantically writing on this page,
Mm.
and he'd have like 8 or 9 pages of notes,
Wow.
with like, he was writing in Korean, so I couldn't translate it, but it like some shapes on it too, and all this stuff. And
Mm.
he um he would just unpack the person's entire life and
Mm.
say, this happened to you at this age, and it affected you in this way, and now you have this condition. If you don't make these changes, it will continue along this course.
So let me do two things.
Yeah.
One, let's just talk about pulse taking for those who don't take pulses. So people who go to the doctor, which I don't suggest, but if you want to, you can. Okay, but if you do, they're going to take your pulse, and they're generally going to probably put their fingers on your neck and or maybe on your wrist, and they're going to get your heart rate. That is not necessary. That is not what you're talking about right now.
Mm,
What Rory is discussing is the sort of Chinese medical way of taking the pulse, which is at the wrist, and there's various ways of doing this, but you're feeling someone's pulse, and it's not, yes, it is the heart rate, but it's far more than just the numbers of beats per minute. There are, like anything, far more subtle qualities that pulse has, and it tells a story. And that kind of pulse taking reminds me a lot of some other Chinese medical pulse taking systems, the Shanghan Lun in particular, which is called the Treatise on Cold Damage, which we are not going to get into because that is way too deep in the weeds, even for acupuncturists. So we're going to leave it alone. But needless to say, watching him do that and being able to get basically someone's life story from pulse taking, from putting his fingers on their wrists and feeling
mm,
some beats and
mhm.
whatever. He and was he right? I guess is my next question. Was he correct?
Yes. I mean, it I knew that he was different at that point, that
Mm,
it wasn't just some system too, that he was tapped into something. And at that moment, I knew that I was making the change to still being on the frontier of mystery, but in a much more embodied way.
mm.
And yeah, I maybe after the show, I could show you a brief recording of
Yeah, I
him
love it.
doing my father. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I like that. Plus that line is cool. Being on the frontier of mystery. I'll probably title the podcast that. I always
Awesome.
every title that I have from a podcast always comes from the episode. There's always something cool that comes up. All right, so you saw this person and you said I'm sold, and you started to, and that's what drew you in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. And then you have currently a clinical practice outside of Philadelphia with your wife. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And you practice this style of um
Yeah, we practice, the Dohan clinical style.
And
I
are you
should.
able to do that also?
No, not like that. No,
I was
we
hoping for a
can.
different answer, Rory.
Yeah,
Yes, I
I
can.
wish.
I totally.
No,
You ate
I,
eggs for breakfast again? You know better. 3 days a week is most.
that was crazy. One time I did see him be like, "You ate this a week ago, and it caused this reaction." Um, anyways, what we can do is, so I learned the system of how to do it. It requires a different dimension to map the entire life, and in doing that, you're following the six chi instead of just. For people who don't know about pulse diagnosis, I think about it a lot like signal processing in mathematics,
Okay.
where you're referencing sine curves. Like in us talking right now,
Yeah.
it's traveling through electromagnetic, it's traveling in these sine curves,
Yeah.
and then that's interpreted discretely. And
Yeah.
so there's all these different types of ways to interpret the sine curve, and they have their efficiencies and deficiencies, and there's many systems of
Mhm.
taking the pulse as well.
Yes.
And so, but the pulse isn't just a laminar wave. Like there's no like body, like in a river, there's all types of curls and everything. So
Yeah.
that's what you're looking at. So sometimes you'll feel something medial or lateral to the pulse itself, and
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
generally you can see something coming within a number of days, or something that's, we call it a guest energy, which is in the yun chi. So it's still influencing the system, and it could be something in their mind that's already happened and that they're stuck on, or something that may happen. And sometimes a lot of it's just, you talk to someone and you change the way that they're processing something, and
Yes.
that guest energy will shift in that moment too.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, well, we're getting too deep into it, but there's a host and guest treatments that, can then, right? But
Mhm,
that last point that you have, I think, is a very important one, and one that, we haven't had actually this deep of a Chinese medical discussion on the
mhm.
podcast the entire time.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I can.
No, you're good, bro.
Mhm,
Don't even trip, because we haven't done it, So I
mhm,
think for students of Chinese medicine, which we have a good number, because I taught, and Eric still teaches at Pacific College of
mhm,
Oriental Medicine, or what do they call it? Pacific College of Health Sciences now.
mhm,
Teaches, as they calling it, lovingly call it, So we have a number of those people. Then I have patients of mine, and hello people who are listening to this, and I'm sure that you'll probably share this with some of your patients as a way to drive home, the things that you talk to them about in the clinic, which is what I totally do.
mhm,
Things that I discuss in here are with me. They're present for me as we talk about them, and then they come with me into the clinic and they help to inform what I'm sharing with people. And then I go, hey, you know what? Go listen to that episode called "Not Enough Jesuses." That's what which was one we did a couple weeks ago that I've been quite fascinated with. But um, that to your point, we're feeling what the body is communicating without words,
mhm,
and it has to be interpreted via our perception
mhm,
of, as you said, laminar flow, or waves in a sense, you know what I'm saying? But that we can have effect physiologically, not just psychologically, but physiological, physical effects on the body via change in perception,
mhm,
or even via like very light touch. And case in point, we had some medical students that were doing some, I guess, alternative medicine rounds for their degree, and they came to Pacific College when I was in school, and I was the head intern at that time for the shift, and so they were following me in my rounds. And
mhm.
I said, okay, well, let's take the pulse. And they're like, okay. So they just they, brutishly grabbed someone's wrist and squeezed it like a, soft apple, or I don't, whatever. And they're like, okay, what am I feeling for? I'm like, well, that is not how you,
Yeah.
that is how a gorilla grabs a banana. That is not, so I kind of taught them where to put their fingers. I said, okay, I am going to take not even a needle, but just like a tube known in Japanese as a teishin, and it's
Mhm,
used to kind of have like an effect like a needle, but you don't insert anything, because Japanese acupuncture is very much about as light and as little input as possible, but intentional, but very slight. And so I took and I just touched a couple points on the body, and I just held and waited till I felt the chi come. And then I said, okay, don't touch them while I'm doing this. And then go back and feel again. And
Mhm.
they did. And the eyebrows were on the forehead. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh wow." I said, "Yeah, it doesn't have to take that much." And I love the point that you bring up that like you can do the same thing with conscious conversation,
Yeah.
and helping to someone to kind of take what they're thinking, and more importantly how they're thinking, and give them a new opportunity to think differently and see something
Yeah.
from a different perspective. Do you have an example that you could share of that with somebody that you've worked with, that when you see the light go off in someone's mind, and we're lucky because we're practitioners,
Mhm.
and so we have the opportunity to do this every day. If
Mhm.
maybe sometimes we talk to a friend or a loved one, and we get to do that for them once in a while, but I mean literally we get to do this on a daily basis if we're lucky.
Mhm. Uh, well, it just makes me think of I'm trying to think of a specific example, but then I'm thinking, "Oh, I wouldn't wanna
Yeah, yeah.
do this to anyone that I'd be sending this to."
Sure, no problem. Okay.
Um,
Did it
but,
happen? How about when you were a student and when you were learning with a
yeah.
Dohan? Like, was somebody able to do that to you? And how did that moment feel? Even let's just call it an aha moment. You know,
Okay.
and that
Well,
aha moments also have physiological changes.
yeah.
Or if, happen to your, we'll throw. I don't know if you have a sibling that you want to throw under the bus or something like that. We do.
Well, I mean, it could sure. Yeah, we could do.
Whatever you're
Um,
comfortable with, Rory. It's all good, brother.
well, I just wanna get to a larger point of
Sure.
this, something that I learned early on in Dohan is that anything can be medicine.
Yeah.
When you really study the numerics, you learn that it's all just energy manipulation, and being a healer is almost like the same position as being a magi. I know that might bring up too many weird connotations or subconscious connections, but you are manipulating energy for a specific result, and probably for health and happiness.
Yeah.
And so anything can be medicine. So sometimes it's just a couple words to help someone process something better. Sometimes it's a spiritual understanding. Sometimes it's you need more bone broth in your diet.
Mm,
Sometimes it's just you need more vitamin D. It can be any of these dimensional levels, and I use this all the time with patients, and it gets back to what we were talking about with the 5 elements too. It doesn't even have to be just 5 elements. It can be
sure.
the way that someone's approaching something, which fundamentally is, the numerology. But I was with someone in the car, and this person they had just had a breakup we were talking about. And so they were really, they were wounded. And so they were really prickly. They had a lot of wood energy to kind of make a force field around us. And we were all suffering because of it. So I start looking for a song that'll help the generating cycle along and just move it. And I found like Alicia Keys, "Some people want it all, but
Oh,
I
I
don't."
don't
and,
want
and yeah, then she
everything.
started crying, and this was a family member. She started crying, and then she was like, "I just don't get," and then was
Yeah,
much
it broke.
more
So
open.
what,
And
Rory, for people who are just wanting to take a little bit of that piece, right?
Mhm.
You're looking at the wood element, you're looking at like anger, frustration,
Yeah.
irritability as the primary emotion in the moment, right?
Mhm.
And that needs to move.
Mhm.
That sense of bindedness, boundness, whatever the right
Mhm.
word is.
Yeah.
English wasn't my first language, so you have to forgive me,
Mhm.
it was goo goo gaga bop. That was my no, but so you have the sense you could feel someone's stuckness, right?
Yeah.
And then and so what was the emotion that you were looking to kind of help move that through? Like when you found
So
the song, what were you looking for?
yeah, so I was naturally just trying to move that into the fire element, so like sadness. And in the Doan perspective, I never saw this in Chinese medicine school, and I thought it was really fascinating, is that it applies yin yang theory to even the five elements. So each of the organs not only just has one emotion to it, but it has its yin and yang nature. So obviously the heart is love, and it's also heartbreak, and that joy and sadness. And so,
Mhm. Let's do all of
you
them.
know,
Let's do all of them just for people. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and to so it's not just theoretical, like in anyone who's listening, your most tender moments, like the moment you get married, or maybe a proposal, or a baby born, whatever it is, like your most joyful, tender, heart-opening moments, you feel this like this heartbreak in there simultaneously, this
Mhm.
sadness. Why do we cry in these moments of pure joy? And we
Mhm.
feel like this, like it can almost, the love can be like almost difficult to bear.
Mhm.
But because the yin and yang go together, they're always together. So
Yeah.
then we go into and then would we talk about anger. Anger is also creativity. So it's like frustration and your ability to like problem solve
Mhm.
this thing. If you think about it on the organic level, like the blood has two elements of the white blood cells and the red blood cells. The liver stores the blood. Um, and then the kidneys are also um, like a fear detector. So there are fear, but we also learn that our jur, or the
Our will.
spirit of that,
Yeah.
yeah, our will is from the kidneys. So it requires, there's no adventure movie without the sense of fear
Yeah.
too. So you need that to have like drive. And
My friend calls that like being at the top of the roller coaster. You're
yeah.
excited, but you're also scared. It's gonna.
Yeah, yeah. And for a while when I first started doing lectures, I would think about like, oh, when was a time when I was like really sad? If I was like really anxious to do to
Mm.
do like a lecture in front of a bunch of people or something like that. And
Mhm.
and yeah, and so you think about the metal is also grief, but it's also like letting go, like holding on and letting go. You think about your large intestine, your colon, and your lungs.
Mhm.
It's this inhale and exhale, and um, the earth element is worry, and then it's also processing, healthy digestion of
Mhm.
whatever the situation is. And so in this specific situation, like the liver, it's not just our our physiological detoxing, but it's also our energetic detoxing.
Yeah.
And so when that gets overloaded with a negative emotion, the diaphragm will get blocked off to prevent that pathogenic chi from injuring the heart. And
Mhm.
so so people will get prickly, and they'll be stuck in their liver, their diaphragm will be stuck. If you're stressed, overly stressed, you may notice that you're like thinking about this thing that's stressing you. Sometimes you'll stop breathing. You'll
Yeah, for
notice, oh, I
sure.
need to breathe. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
diaphragm's blocked off.
Yep. And then
So, and
people
that's
people
sorry.
tend to breathe. They breathe up a little bit higher,
Yeah, yeah,
up in the upper part of the chest. And then I see, and I'm sure you do too, tons of
mhm,
like tight neck scalenes and
yeah,
trapezius muscles, occipital and lateral headaches because of how this is here. And then tightness in the jaw. And all of
yeah,
that is from suspended breath, waiting
yeah,
to exhale, literally.
yeah, yeah,
Also a
absolutely.
movie with Angela Bassett for those keeping score.
Haven't seen that one.
Yeah, no, me neither, but I remember the poster.
Okay. So back in that specific example, it
Yeah.
was to move that pathogenic chi into the heart, feel the injury
Mm.
that she was feeling, and just get an energy, an environment, a heavenly energy, a surrounding environment that would facilitate this movement of the generating cycle forward.
So you wanted to kind of create an atmosphere of sadness, if you will, in
Mhm.
order to let the anger bleed out into it and be held by that.
Yeah, to naturally progress into, so at first injured and we're upset about it. And often when the diaphragm blocks, that pathogenic liver chi it uh controls the invades the earth element,
Hmm.
and then we get all these resentments and narratives that kind of bind us into that anger. And so by creating the sadness, it can naturally uh, you know
Hmm.
bloom into the heart region.
And what you bring up a good point, and I don't know if you're doing it consciously or not, but like being the earth element, talking about the earth element, the breaking down of the stories, but also the creation of them, right? That's like the yin and the
Hmm.
yang of it. That
Hmm.
like the narratives in our heads are
Hmm.
often highly inaccurate.
Yeah.
And that like the but they're required because they hold reality in place,
Hmm.
even if it's incorrect. Some part of them was taken from something. That's the seed. Then the seed gets
Yeah.
planted and that grows a tree or a bush, depending on what you're into. And then that yields fruit. And if that fruit is coming from an inaccurate seed, then that fruit is then going to be inaccurate. And our stories that we tell ourselves and then recapitulate and then redigest and recapitulate and redigest and break down over and over again is just this
Hmm.
looping kind of, and what is the word that they use that this in Chinese, the Chinese medicine, not excessive pondering, but rumination.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that's how that goes. So I found that as you were talking about that, I was like, oh yeah, that's one word that has been more, I guess, present for me over the last year is trying to interrupt that, trying to cut through that narrative, that unhealthy narrative that people have, and provide some language to that to be able to help them change not just mentally, but then into the physiology as well, because they're both, related. And some of the meditative traditions don't give the body enough credit
Mhm.
for its presence because it is breaking down and decaying, and we have to definitely have to polish our shen, our spirits, our souls. But we are a product of embodiment at the same
Mhm.
time, and it does have correlates that are mm, influenced by our ancestry and what they've been
Mhm.
through, and we inherit tendencies even if we have no idea that they're influencing us. And so I think that like this kind of thinking is a different form of empowerment,
Mhm.
of unlocking some of the, what we call mysteries, which to other
Mhm.
people call a system of study of being human. There is no operator's manual, owner's manual for this most advanced piece of equipment. And we
Mhm.
ride it every day without knowing how to use it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so to me, this is like part of my own life's mission is to figure out how this thing works before I have to get into another one. You know what I'm saying? And maybe I could bring some whispers of it with me next time and get it a little bit sooner and, figure the game out a little bit more easily. If that fits.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would say that's my main objective in my heart, that s spiritual development's really the only thing for me. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it's all about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm blessed to be able to, I don't know if you share some of those insights with your patients in the clinic, but I do. I
Yeah.
definitely do. And people appreciate it. Not everybody does. Sometimes it turns people off, but I don't know if you get a chance to do that with some of your, um,
There's an art to reading, like, when it's appropriate for sure, but
yeah.
yeah, I do, and I never try and, you know I think a big switch for me was when I was so determined upon a big switch in my own practice, and maybe that's not the same for everyone, but
Yeah.
when I shift the objective from improving myself and developing myself to an act of devotion, when I
Hmm.
could really like feel the life inside me and like
Yeah.
really connect with my, eh, you know, not to be too cheesy, but like connect with your own heart. Like when
Yeah.
your heart really is connected to your soul, it's like
Yep.
that's the fulfillment of life. There, that's really what it's about for me.
No, I'm with you. I mean, we didn't get a chance to talk about it today, so you're gonna have to come on again, and we'll have to do a DMT episode for sure.
Sure, sure, yeah,
We just didn't
absolutely,
get a chance to get, that's how it works. But one of the things I heard in my very first ayahuasca ceremony was the way to the cosmos is through the heart.
yeah,
Like within the first 10 minutes,
mhm,
and I was like, oh, okay, sweet. I guess I'm good now.
yeah,
I don't have to sit here and puke in this bucket, right? Like I'm good. Yeah, nah, sorry. You got an early key, but there will be more coming down the road. But I agree with you. Um,
yeah,
yeah, that's a really nice sentiment, Rory, actually. Like changing the mindset from self-improvement to an act of devotion. I think that's and when you say an act of devotion, is that an act of devotion as an expression of gratitude or an act of devotion as a means of embodying divinity? Like how does that part, this would be the last kind of thing that we probably talk about before
sure.
but like how does that, what is, break that down a little bit more because I am interested in hearing. I like this mindset.
I think, when you have for whatever reason, you have those experiences, you go into a ceremony and like you said, you have this deep truth and it sounds like a platitude and but you feel the truth. You
Yeah.
feel it in your whole body.
Yeah.
And so um I think I got lost in my own train of thought. Can you repeat the question one
Yeah,
more
sure, no
time?
problem. So it's okay. It happens once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, you said moving from self-improvement,
Yeah.
act of devotion.
Right.
And so I
Okay,
am
what is
I
the
I un-
devotion?
I understand the self-improvement part.
Yeah,
It's an important piece of life, for
right,
sure, because we should be getting better at things. It shows devotion. But
right,
devotion on the side of dedication, meaning
right,
it's important, and the more that you do it, the more that it's going to yield to you something. Like you talked about, we come from life like a, branch on a tree.
right.
And so the more that that tree goes, the deeper that's going to get. But an act of devotion is a different expression of life or a different expression of spirituality than what gets sold as self-improvement or self-help. And so I
Yeah.
wanted you to expound upon this a little bit.
Well, I think it shifts it. It is a gratitude, but you have an experience and you see your own nature and you become so it's so intoxicating, the feeling that
Yeah.
it's not about I have to do this thing. It's that old, saying it's not a it's you should shift it from you have to do this to I get to do this. And
Mm,
so it's a transformation of like determination and grit to excitement and love and like I love to do these things.
mm,
I love to teach, and I feel like I'm a better teacher, and I'm a better practitioner, and I'm much my spiritual practice is much more fulfilling because I'm so, in love with it, because
mm,
I love it, because 'cause I'm gonna do it all the time. That's what I want to do, and that becomes your nature. It's like a natural expression, and in my own experience, meditation is the focusing of the ministerial fire to the Chong Mai, but it requires the imperial fire's consent. So in
yeah.
non-Chinese medicine terms,
Non-Chinese medicines, yes.
it's as we all understand, it's bringing the mind to the present moment, but it requires the fire of the heart's consent.
Mm,
It really requires that piece. And
mm,
so when you can do that and feel the fruit of that, it's just, that's the biggest boon.
I agree with you. I tell people on a daily basis that not showering nor brushing your teeth is more important than making time for meditation. And we have the
Yeah.
time. We just have to do it. There is not a thing, I'll do these cacao ceremonies, which are long things, and we're
Hmm.
doing all kinds of holotropic and meditative type breath work, and people have
Hmm.
very, very deeply transcendent experiences. One coming up this weekend, but by the time this podcast comes out, I won't be able to plug it, so I'll just, talk about it, whatever. And I will have people give a little bit of an introduction because it's a communal experience. So I could have anywhere between 15 to 30 people at these things. And I often will say I say, introduce yourself, tell us what you'd like to be called, and then give us your favorite cartoon as growing up, or tell us what you do or what you like to do. And this last time I said, tell me what you do in this life, not your job, but what you do
Hmm.
in this life. And I think it got to me at the end because I can't think about it. I'm trying to come up with a question. I can't lead first. I have to come back to me at the end. And I gave them a name that was given to me upon an empowerment, a Buddhist empowerment. And then I said, I teach meditation. And I believe that to be the greatest thing that I could do in this lifetime.
Hmm.
And I mean that, wholeheartedly. So I hear what you're saying, and I love the way that you put that. I think that's a
It's the greatest gift if you can connect someone to their own divinity, the
yes.
Tao within, that's at the center of everyone. That is the greatest humanitarian service I think you can do. That
That is it. That is it.
I'll tell you one DMT story because I think it's relevant. If we have time. Do we have time?
We got whatever time you want. It's all good. I
I'll
want I
give
want to make sure we have, but I want to make sure we have all of our stories set for next time too, though. You know what I'm saying? So, but go ahead. I'm
Okay. Well, it's just very relevant to the whole,
then
working.
we'll finish it right here. You go ahead and take it away.
Okay. So the shift from self-improvement to
Devotion.
devotion and joy, and like the fulfillment of life being in what you love.
Yeah.
That is the feeling of fulfillment of life. And so uh I have a very, at the time, I still do my qigong and everything, but the mindset was very different. And so it was very militant, and I would push through, and I would hold horse stances for like 10 minutes in this one Dohan style. And I smoked DMT prior to doing this horse stance. And I encountered these beings, which I had never met before, a very different space, very like neon-y, and these beings were approaching, and I was like kind of like energetically coagulating, like a little afraid of them. I wasn't sure what
Hmm.
the interaction was going to be. And then when they got close, they were really playful, and it's all telepathically, this gets lost in translation, but they said to me like, um, so why are you doing that? And I'm like, uh I think it's a good idea. And they were like, all, like poking fun of me, like, "Are you having a good time?" Like,
Yeah.
and then they're
Yeah.
like, "Come on, let's show you this." Like the fun and the joy is like where the life is at. And
Mm.
that's not to say that hard work isn't important and everything,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was just a lesson that was important for me at that moment. And that wasn't what totally made the shift. There was a lot of events, but I thought that was just fitting
That
for
that
me.
is that is very fitting. I'm always down to end or begin on a DMT influenced story, you're just so psycho energetically, emotionally vulnerable in those spaces that
Mhm.
the lessons that come through are so uniquely personal and deep that
Yeah,
they are more valuable than the most precious metal,
yeah,
on this planet. And those are peak experiences. And you know, they're worth it. They're totally worth it. So
yeah.
um, anyway, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing everything, my friend. This was really great. I'd love to have you on again. There's so much more to cover, and you're a passionate speaker and have a lot to share. So I was definitely educated and entertained. I asked questions that were just for my dumbass. So that's that's all good with me. Before we part out of here and I, do my little closing thing, is there anything else that you would like to share in particular about, yourself, or, anything you got coming up, or I know I asked you this earlier, but I figured I'd give you, just a moment to say a little parting shot to our audience that you might know, or, you know, will be familiar with this after this.
Uh, not I don't have anything really to I think I'll just say, thank you so much for having me on. I've really
Of course.
enjoyed, speaking with you, and I enjoy you as a person.
Oh,
So
thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you
yeah,
as
your
well.
enthusiasm and your all of that shines through. So
Yeah, well, thank you.
it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, no, this was great. Thank you for coming on. And again, for people who are, I've been saying this now, but like if you've listened to the end, your attention span is within the top 10% of the population of the United States. So congratulations for getting here, and for whoever's listening to this, to Rory's audience, thank you guys for tuning in. For my audience, as always, I want to say thank you to everybody for listening. I want to thank Rory for coming on for sure. And if you like our work, obviously like, subscribe, share. If you want to send us an email, jinandtantra@gmail.com, or leave a like or subscribe or leave a comment in the YouTube section. You can hit us up on Instagram, Jin and Tantra Podcast. We post all of our stuff up there as well. If you have any questions, or anything in particular for Rory, please feel free to email me, that I can put you in contact with him. If you're interested, or if you're in and around the Philadelphia area and you want to make an appointment with him, I'll be glad to hook you up. Rory does actually have some lectures that are recorded, that if anybody is interested in purchasing or accessing those, I will give you the link to that as well. They are totally worth it. I, did one with him live about a month ago, and despite his youthful appearance, he has a lot of wisdom behind him. So I find it to be entertaining and authentic, which for me, those are very important things when listening to conversations like this, is that people got to be real. And I definitely feel like, you're being real with all of this, which is so awesome, and so empowering to see other people live this kind of life and pursue these kinds of things, even as society does what it does, ass backwards, with attention spans that are, 4 seconds or less. Like, I want mine to be, more and more and more and more, to be able to be present and have questions and dive deep into things that you're saying. And so yeah, that's our mission, one of many here. So thanks for coming on again. Thanks everybody for tuning in. For Eric and Rory, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.